And we want to start by looking at a dashboard. So this is a dashboard we've pulled together, based on this case study that's trying to show at a quick glance the status of where we are with our migration efforts. So what we have here on the top left is the ability to see the state of all these different migration requests. So we can see some are here in this open state, they're currently being worked. We can see that we've approved a good portion of those already. And then there are a few that have been closed out, having been completed in their migration effort. On the right-hand side here in the migration tasks, we're able to see both those consultations and fulfillment tasks that have been created for these different migration requests. The key difference between a consultation and fulfillment task is that a consultation is expected to be completed in a relatively short amount of time. It's something that we can do to quickly gut check and have a conversation with the business to understand what are they looking to migrate, and is this going to be a problem? And we can kind of get that finger in the air decision as to whether or not we want to progress with this effort. A fulfillment task, on the other hand, is something that usually requires a little more effort. That could be performing a risk assessment or a penetration test, or onboarding this application to a number of different services, whether that be our risk and compliance program, our security operations, configuration compliance program, and many others. And so the idea is that those tasks that can be completed in short order, we do those up front before we decide to invest a lot of time, effort, and energy into migrating the solution onto the cloud. Down below in the next kind of 8 different reports here, really just showing a snapshot of all these different migration efforts by the different ratings that we've determined. So we can see there's a smattering of different confidentiality ratings, different data classifications that have been determined for these workloads. We see that there's a split between the integrity ratings between vital and standard integrity. And all of these ratings that we have here in scales are something that can be configured to meet your organization's current scales and rubrics. And so we've got here just kind of key characteristics that help us understand what is this workload and potentially what controls need to be implemented. What sort of builds do we need to use for the infrastructure to make sure that we have the right hardening and compliance posture for each of these workloads. The last report I want to draw your attention to at the bottom here is just a quick report that's showing us all the different migrations by the different business owners. So it allows us to quickly see who is requesting this, get an understanding of which parts of our business are adopting our digital transformation objectives, and where we may be able to target some awareness and be able to branch out to different parts of our business. So while this is a report that's showing us all of our different dashboards, we want to show you what this looks like from the start. So switching over to this portal that we've built specifically for this digital transformation cloud migration effort. As David mentioned, a business member can come in here and request a new workload be migrated. So we'll go ahead and click this, and we just gather a few pieces of information up front. And so we may want to migrate our underwriting service from our traditional on-prem infrastructure to the cloud. The nice thing is we can link this to the business service within the CMDB, making sure that we have that connection between the ITSM, CMDB data, and this kind of effort to migrate into the cloud. The last 2 pieces of information here are who is the business owner and what's a slightly more detailed description for this request. With these kind of handful of pieces of information, we can then start the assessment process. So we have these migration questions, and this is where we start to understand what is this workload and what are all those different ratings associated with it. So what type of business service is this? Well, maybe it's a general application. What type of product is this? Is this a commercial off the shelf? Is this a custom application that we developed for our organization? And what's the hosting model that we would like to be using going forward? And so those are some of the initial questions to help us understand the workload. And then we can start to ask targeted questions around all those different key characteristics. It's worth mentioning that as part of the decision engine, we provide a set of kind of default starting questions. So you're not starting with a blank page that you can then tune for your organization. Oftentimes, there's an effort to work with all of those different stakeholders, identify who wants to leverage this decision engine process, identify what are their key characteristics that we need to identify to help us understand which controls need to be implemented, which infrastructure builds, and what are those follow-on tasks that need to occur. And so with all of that, we can build in that business logic so that as we start to answer these different questions, we can get those different ratings and tasks generated. Now, I don't want to drag you through filling out each of these different sections with all the different questions. So we're going to jump to our claims processing application, which has previously completed those migration questions. Based on the results of those questions, identified a total of 19 tasks that need to occur, 11 of which are those consultations. So we need to have a discussion with our business continuity and disaster recovery team, our integrated risk management team. We also need to involve legal, and make sure we understand some of the data privacy, records retention requirements. And it's really making sure that we go out, have those conversations with these different stakeholder groups before we move this workload. Once all of these consultations have been completed, we can then go for approval. And this approval can be sent to the business owner. This could be sent to someone within the information technology leadership team who ultimately is determining whether or not this is a good candidate to move from the traditional on-prem into the cloud. Once that approval has been obtained, that's when we would start our fulfillment tasks. And that could be onboarding to our integrated risk management program, performing those risk assessments, documenting the controls in place. Could be setting up our configuration compliance monitoring. So Will will be showing us here in a few moments' time what this looks like. But ultimately, we want to be able to keep track of the configurations for the different workload over time. So as part of this process, we start to identify what are the key controls that need to be implemented, what is the different build and configurations and hardening required, and that gets us to a great place from day one. But we need to manage this going forward. So getting into the cloud is just that first step.